Well, hey, everybody, welcome to the Seeing Ability podcast. On this podcast, we're having a dialogue about persons living with disabilities. We're going to be having conversations with parents raising kids with special needs, with adults who were that kid growing up as a disability, and with those who support them. So that might mean medical professionals, might mean people in education, or people working in some amazing nonprofits supporting this community. I'm Jim Littlefield Dalmaris. I'll be your host today. Now, I understand that you've got a lot of choices when it comes to podcasts. So first of all, thank you for spending your time with us today. We've got a really great guest with us today, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the unique circumstances recording this in a minute. Inam, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Now, it's not every day that I have a friend who I want to have on the podcast because she's an amazing person. I think you'll agree after you hear it today, with an amazing story, making a difference in a lot of people's lives. But it's not often that she says, hey, Jim, I know we're supposed to record that podcast, but I'm going to be going into the hospital. Do you think you could meet me in my hospital room and record it there? Now, that's dedication. What made you want to do the podcast, even from your hospital room?
Because I want people to know, no matter what condition you're in, you can still do it while you're in the hospital.
There you go. That's total Inam. I think you guys are going to get to love her as much as I have, knowing her many, many years. So glad to have you on the show. Let's start out like we do with all of our guests with the Fast Four. Now, the Fast Four is brought to you today by the folks at Reliable Tech Help. For all your IT needs, call Reliable Tech Help at 502-797-7399. So, Inam, number one, what is your favorite junk food?
Vanilla ice cream. I love it.
Vanilla ice cream. Gotta love it. Okay. Number two, what's your favorite program to listen to?
Price is Right.
The Price is Right. There you go. Okay. Number three, what is, if you could pick one, what's a music that you like to listen to?
Well, I love children's music, and the first lady of children's music is Miss Ella Jenkins, and I've gotten to perform on stage with her, and she's still with us today, still around at 98 years old.
Shout out to Ella Jenkins and children's music. And last but not least, if you could take a trip and go someplace, where would you like to go?
I would love to go to the Grand Ole Opry.
Grand Ole Opry down in Nashville, Tennessee. Fantastic. All right. Well, we don't always like to ask a lady what her age is, but you told me recently, let's just say you're in your mid-40s this month, and that's pretty amazing given what your mom was told when you were born. For those of the audience, of course, who haven't met you, tell us a little bit about how your life started out. It was not exactly what your parents were expecting.
I was born 3 months premature, and the doctors basically told my parents that I wasn't going to live. And so I was born on March 16th, but 2 days into the hospital, Mom got a call from the doctor saying, you have to come quick. We have to do open heart surgery right away. She may not survive the open heart surgery, but we have to do open heart surgery. We don't know what's going to happen after that. Then I also survived a stroke and 4 months of being on a respirator for 4.5 months. And I didn't get to come home from the hospital until July 16th of 1976. So my mom and dad were told, she's not going to survive, and I'll be turning 47 this month.
Well, happy birthday, happy birth month to you. That's a lot of things to be thrown at young parents. Now, when you were growing up, thinking back to your kind of elementary years, your middle school years, if you were telling people that weren't familiar with you, what kind of diagnosis, what kind of challenges did you have? Were you faced with as a result of being born with all those traumas?
I was born blind, and I was also born with cerebral palsy. When I was little, it was very mild. We hardly knew that I had the cerebral palsy. But then when I started my sophomore year in high school, things changed quickly. One night I was walking. The next night I woke up and I could not walk for 1.5 years. Now, as an adult, I now am plagued with numerous challenges. I'm blind, have cerebral palsy, arthritis, a motility disorder, and sleep apnea, all to contend with.
Not to mention recently a cancer survivor.
Yes.
And always a smile on your face every
Yes.
time I've ever seen you. Amazing. Thank you for sharing. One of the ways I met you, and I think one of the ways a lot of people know you, is you've got a spirit for volunteerism and helping others. And that started when you were young. I think you told me right around the high school age, you started working with youth who were blind. Tell us what got you into that and what did you love about that work?
Well, in 1995, I wanted to volunteer with kids. So I started volunteering with junior high and elementary kids, teaching them to read Braille. And the reason being, the aides that taught me in elementary school, they did not know Braille. So I was having to help my good friend, Brian Wolkowski, with Braille homework at school. And so then in 1995, I volunteered to teach 2 classes of kids as an aide, helping junior high and elementary school kids. I went 1 day a week, and I had to take 2 buses just to get to the school.
Now, you also did a lot of work, not only there, but over the years, going into classrooms and kind of doing, let's call it disability awareness, kind of talking to people about these issues. Tell me a little bit about that.
I went to Kentucky Country Day School here, and I also volunteered at Three Rivers Center for Independent Living in Pittsburgh, talking to groups, sighted kids, and 4th graders about barrier awareness and that people are people first, and then there are people with a disability.
Talking to 4th graders is always entertaining. I bet you they had some interesting questions. Can you think back to what was the most common question you got being a person who wasn't sighted from kids, 4th graders who could see?
Well, a lot of them would say, why do you want to be this way? And I tell the kids, people with disabilities don't have a choice, but it's your attitude that you choose. I had 2 choices. Either I could wake up every day and be happy or be sad. On that note, here's a letter my mom got. My mom got a letter sent home from school. They said, pick up your daughter, it's an emergency. She went to school thinking that my foot was broken. And no, they sent her a letter saying, your child is too happy. She doesn't cry all day. You need to come and get her from school because she's too happy.
Now that's a first. I don't think I've ever heard about a letter that you're too happy.
Yeah.
Maybe a letter for, I don't know, when I was growing up, maybe it was bad behavior or talking too much in class. I know a few friends that have gotten those letters, but never too happy. But that doesn't surprise me knowing you.
But they said she doesn't cry all day and she's too happy. So we need to pick her up from school.
So with your volunteerism, especially with other teenagers who were kind of navigating the world of having disability, what are some of the things you saw where they were more successful? And what about the kids who were struggling? What was the difference in them or in the way their parents worked with them?
There were parents like my mom who said, we're going to give this kid the best possible outcome, give them Braille, give them audiobooks, give them cane travel skills. And then there were parents that said, my child is much more happier if he plays. So therefore, we don't need to teach him Braille because he's much more happier if he plays. Or I had a mother who said, but she doesn't need to learn to walk because she has a condition. And I said to the mother, she has a condition, but her feet are fine. And the little girl said to me, when I taught her, are you going to carry me around school all day? And I said, you're a big girl, Katie. I'm going to teach you how to walk, Katie. You're a big girl. And this is how we walk. I'm not going to carry you around all day.
So the idea of teaching them to strive, even if it was a struggle, to do stuff for themselves versus kind of the, the, the parents who maybe with good intentions kind of did stuff for them.
Yeah. Because when you have good intentions and you do stuff for them, you teach them that they don't need to do it for themselves. And then what happens is they become adults who are now in their 40s and they can't tell time, or they can't, use talking machines to read their medicine, and it really is a disservice, because when the parents unfortunately pass away, the adults don't know how to manage on their own.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, your volunteerism has not just been noticed by me and other nonprofits. You were actually nominated for and received, for those of our listeners who are out of town, here in Louisville, Kentucky, we have something called the Bell Awards, which it's kind of the who's who of the city that's been nominated and given this award. Now, you received it. It's a big award ceremony. They get up and they talk about you. They do a little speech and everything. You were a Bell Award winner. Tell us what it was like when you heard that you won that award, and what was it like going to that ceremony?
Well, my mom had nominated me for the ceremony, and back then it was the last live show that they did. And so they called me up. They said, our next participant is Inam Shalati. And then they said a little speech about me. Inam volunteers to read to sighted kids and preschool kids. And she helps people with restaurants, she volunteers to make menus in Braille for restaurants. And then after they played my speech, then they said, Inam Shalati will be escorted by Bill Alexander. And they escorted me up on stage. And I said, I would like to thank my parents, Daisha Shalati and Muhammad Shalati, for being here tonight. Also, my sisters, Amira, Sue, and my brother Joe. Also, the teachers, Cheryl Harrington, Joyce Miller, Mary Mitchell, and Eddie Wolf, for allowing me to help the kids and the children themselves. Eric, Marissa, Thomas, and Caitlin, for always being a joy to work with.
I've heard a lot of acceptance speeches. You've got that one down, and that was a couple of years ago. When did you win that award?
I won that in 1999, and that was there. That year, they had 125 nominees nominated.
I mean, we know why they picked you. Let's just be honest. Now, in recent years, I know you did a lot of volunteering for many years with an organization. I think back then it was called Elder Serve. I think the name has changed, or their management has changed, but they work with seniors. And you did a really interesting thing, doing calls on a daily basis to check in with seniors, make sure they were okay. Tell us a little bit about that work. First of all, on average, how many calls were you making a day, or have you made, or do you make today?
I make 51 calls in a week.
51 in a week. So like Monday through Friday, right? So
yeah,
about 10 a day on average.
Yeah.
Now, I think you told me once that they have some other volunteers who also make calls, but you are like the cleanup person. If one of them is busy and they can't make their calls, they turn them over to you. Is that right?
Yes. They turn them over to me because they can't handle making 4 calls or 2 calls. And this is an example of how the calls go. Hi, Jim. This is Inam with Telecare. Are you doing okay? Yeah, I'm doing okay. I'll check on you tomorrow.
Fantastic. So you've probably got some seniors that you talk to then on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And even though I know you have a lot of calls and they don't necessarily want you to be on there for like long time, you've probably gotten to know a few of them.
Yes. And we talk. And if we have time, we talk about how they're doing, how their family is, and that kind of thing.
And have you had over the years, any instances where when you checked on them, it seemed like something wasn't right and you were able to alert the agency and maybe step in and do a little bit more thorough check?
Yeah, well, one time a lady wasn't right and I was able to call 911 and get her the help she needed.
Fantastic. That's amazing. And that kind of service is really great. And what a great way for you to give back. Now, when you think about your parents and the job they did raising you, what do you think are some of the things that they got right that helped you become the person you are today as an adult?
Well, one of the things is they trusted me and they believed in me that I could be the best that I could be. And they realized that overprotecting me would be a disservice, because they realized if they overprotected me, that was going to do more harm than good, that I wasn't going to be able to read, that I wasn't going to be able to learn. And they were very educated. And they said, we don't want to put her so she can't read and learn Braille. And my dad told me, we want you to be able to read and write Braille. That would be dumb of us to prevent you from reading Braille, because as I said before, I have a dear friend who I went to school with, and his parents did not allow him to have Braille. They sheltered him, didn't want nobody to know that he was blind, and now he can't read real well. And it's sad, because everybody's not always gonna be there, and Braille is a wonderful thing to have.
Absolutely. So that trust in you was really important, and letting you kind of develop and be the best person you could be. Now, I don't talk to that many people who have songs written about them. And I think if I've kept track, you've had 5 songs written about you. Our good friend, Mr. Dave Canoin out there in California, a wonderful musician, does a lot of work with children's music. What are some of the titles of those songs? What are they about? I mean, I know they're about you. What's the title?
Well, the 4 that he did are Going On Go, Keep On Shining, Anam's 36th birthday, and She Won't Stop Giving. But the song I'm going to sing a line for you today.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Was by my friend Sally, and it goes, she writes those menus down in Braille. Thank you, Inam. From French fries down to fruit cocktail. Thank you, Inam. For blind folks who go out to eat. Thank you, Inam. They can read menus from burgers to treats. Thank you, Inam. She cannot walk, she cannot see, but she's a friend to you and me. Inam is a friend indeed. Thank you, Inam.
Fantastic. I don't usually get performances on the podcast. That is amazing. And that's recent work you've been doing. You've been telling me about these restaurants. And so you go in, give us some samples of restaurants you've worked with, and what's it like doing a whole menu in Braille?
I called Cheddar's restaurant, and I told them I wanted to volunteer my time. And me and my good friend, Bonnie Clark, who helps with the menu, she reads the menus, puts it onto tape, and I do the menus in Braille. And I Braille menus, and I Brailled a lot. So I Brailled Cheddar's, Gracious Plenty, and I got Pizza One.
Wow. So lots of different restaurants, and that's making that so much more enjoyable for folks with visual impairments.
And what's also helped is it's important for the management, because they see me coming in to the restaurant and they see how to work with someone. When one time restaurant said, well, what do we do with you? How do we talk to you? And I said, you talk to me like you do a normal person.
Yeah. So it's helped not only the customers, but helped the restaurant themselves, because they're interacting with someone who has different abilities, and it kind of lets them see you for all the value you bring, not just see your disability.
Yeah. And thank you for seeing, Jim, my ability.
Well, that's the name of this podcast, I think. Seeing ability. That's no coincidence. So let me ask you this: when your time is valuable, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, because you are in the hospital after all. But we always ask people, and you've seen a lot, you've experienced a lot yourself. You've had friends, you've mentored others with disabilities. We always come down at the end to our section where we call the 3 keys. So let's take those one at a time. What are the 3 keys you would think if you were speaking? Maybe somebody's listening here and they have a friend, just had a baby, they're facing some disabilities, they're in those early years, or maybe someone's listening and they're a teenager and they want to know, how to be a successful adult. What do you think are the big 3 for you?
Well, one of the things, I think 3 things. One is teach the kids to be the best. Acceptance. Love the kids for who they are, number 1. Parents, teach the kids to be the best they can be, and love the kids to be the best they can be, and also teach the siblings that the person with the disability is still a person, and the siblings need to treat that person with a disability, brother or sister, that they are a person, and that, for example, Johnny, you will help Susie with changing her diaper because you're part of the family. And just
Okay.
as an example.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So what about number 2? What's your second?
Number 2, don't overprotect. Parents, don't overprotect your kids, because when you do that, it teaches the kids that they cannot do for themselves. And kids need to grow up, because eventually, once you pass away, the kids will not be able to do things on their own. And the kids need to be able to do things on their own when they grow up.
That's a really good point. And I think someone pointed out to me once, when you send that message that they can't do things for themselves, you're also educating the rest of the community. So when they see that person as not able to do things. So it's not only the kid that sees that, the rest of the community sees that versus the other. So that's a great point.
And the kid sees, I can't do anything for myself. I don't need to try. And they don't want to do anything. Number 3, teach the kids that they are lovable, and nothing, the sky's the limit. Nothing is possible. Nothing is possible, but that they have to do the best they can and try as best as they can, and think that they are having a happy and positive attitude is a big help. If you're sad and say, I can't do this, I can't do that. But one of the things I've always been is happy and make the most of, right now I'm not able to stand and walk, but I do the best I can, and we're doing the podcast.
And there you go. And I guess we have to warn our audience, you don't want to be too happy, because they might call you from school and say, get your kid out of there. They're way too happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Inam, your smile is contagious. Our audience, most of them are listening to this, so they can't see you, but the energy in your voice comes through and your spirit comes through. And we're glad that those doctors were wrong and that you did make it, and you were able, think of all the lives that you've been able to touch through your volunteerism and just your giving spirit all these years. It is an honor to have you on the podcast. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, hope you enjoyed hearing from Inam. I know I enjoyed hanging out with her like always, and we appreciate you listening. There's a lot of ways you can spend your very valuable time. This is intentionally a slightly shorter episode today. We know you're busy, and Inam's got to get some rest. She's in the hospital, but we could use your help building the audience for this podcast, because we want as many people as possible to be able to get this information. So a couple of ways you can help us out is go to our Facebook page. If you haven't done so already, like the podcast, follow the podcast. We're also on YouTube. So we would love you to give us that thumbs up and maybe subscribe there. And most importantly, share this with those you know. If you know that parent, if you know that kid growing up with challenges, maybe you know a special education teacher, someone working in a nonprofit, we would love them to share this information. Also, as always, if you have ideas for somebody that you think has a great perspective and would be a future guest, please contact me on the Facebook page. We've loved spending time with you today. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.